Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are jumping into a beer from a new-to-me brewer, and this is one that is one of just a tiny handful I've ever reviewed in one regard, and that is where this beer is from. So this brewer is called Sori Brewing, and they are based in Tallinn, Estonia, one of the Baltic state countries. This beer is called Maximon, and it's an Imperial Baltic porter, clocks in at 12% ABV. This one is bourbon barrel aged, has added habañeros, cinnamon, and chocolate. So yeah, a beer from Estonia. I've only ever done maybe 3, 4. This could be the third or the fourth that I've ever done. The ones I've had prior have been incredible. So I have high hopes for this beer. This one sounds awesome. I did get this from Tavour. So label art on this beer. It's a very nice, clean design on the label. Kind of got a purple background with some kind of busy pattern going in the background, and a lot of kind of gold accents all over. But it's a very nice looking bottle. This is an 11.2 ounce, which is quite common across a lot of Europe as a standard beer size. So a little bit smaller than our standard bottles that we get over here. But we got it cracked, and we're going to pour it right in our old porter glass here. All right. There we go. Oh yeah, that is not having a trouble forming a head. Of course, it is a porter. They do tend to be quite active in terms of carbonation, so I'm expecting just a quick, massive rush up. We'll see how well this head actually holds on. Visually, yeah, classic dark. It's very, very dark. It's essentially pitch black. There is just a hint of light getting through at the bottom of this, but it's a 12%, it's an Imperial, and an Imperial Baltic at that. That's not one that you see all that often, but for the style, it's nice that it has come from a Baltic country with Estonia. I like that. So it did form quite a nice head here. It is collapsing pretty quickly. This actually looks almost mostly from the top down. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and top this off just a bit more. Let that head keep doing its thing. Let's get right up over this for a full sniff. Okay, yeah. So you can definitely pick up some of the spices. The cinnamon really jumps out at me. Chocolate, not so much, but the cinnamon does. You can smell that there's some peppers in here, but it doesn't smell super strong of heat. There's a slight sweetness to it, a little bit of vanilla coming off. That's probably coming from the bourbon barrel. And you can still smell the underlying malt bill. Though I gotta say, the spices in the bourbon barrel are definitely the dominant aromas coming off of this beer, but it smells really, really nice. Okay, head is actually holding pretty well now. It has settled down though, so we're just gonna dive right in, see what this one's about. So, take one. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's really nice porter. Okay. So, this is putting me in mind of exactly what I thought that it would. It's not surprising me in my expectation at all. And that is actually a good thing in basically every respect. So the first thing I gotta say is all of those Mexican hot chocolate inspired style stouts that I've had to date, it's essentially that same formula, but in an Imperial Baltic porter base. And yeah, obviously stout, porter, they're of the same family. A stout is a porter, it's just a stout porter. All stouts are porters, but not all porters are stouts. That's just the way that it works. But this is fantastic. I think it actually is a combination of ingredients that maybe more brewers should consider putting into a porter base instead of a stout base. Because there is, in general, just a little bit of difference in the way that the underlying malt bills come through. And this is a combination of ingredients that plays to the strengths really of either. In this one, it makes it maybe, I don't want to say it's brighter, but it kind of helps some of the additives, kind of the Mexican style hot chocolate flavors that go into the beer pop out a bit more than they do, say, in your equivalent stout. So it's really big, it's got a nice intensity to it, and the flavors really pop out clearly. So I want to start with the bourbon barrel aging side on this. Heaven Hill, a great bourbon barrel choice here. I don't know how long they left it in the barrels, but whatever barrels from Heaven Hill they chose, however long they did, it did a great job. So it's doing its thing in terms of aroma and also in flavor profile. What's coming out of this dominant, there's that classic slight spirit flavor that's going to linger with it because it's been aged in bourbon barrels. But the other underlying subtleties of the barrel that are really coming through clearly on this beer are vanilla. A lot of vanilla notes and a lot of caramelized brown sugar notes popping into this. So it adds this underlying suggestion of sweetness, though this is not a sweet beer. But what that does is help some of these other additives pop out. Makes the cinnamon really clear. The chocolate in this is actually really clear. And I think that could partially be coming from the fact that this is in a slightly less intense roast malt base, being that it's porter versus stout. And it does help that to pop out with a bit more clarity. Chocolate gets lost in a lot of stouts, but it's quite clear here and distinctly taste of chocolate. Habanero, yeah, it's got a nice little bit of heat. This is one where they didn't go over the top. They didn't go overboard. It's got a nice bit so you can pick it up on the nose, but it doesn't taste strongly of the actual flesh of the pepper, more adds just a little bit of heat to the back, which is kind of the best balance in my opinion. I've had a kind of all over the board with a lot of these kind of same themed additives, and I gotta say, when you use a little more reserved hand with the chilies to just draw out more of the heat and less of the flesh of the pepper, it does make for a better beer drinking experience. It's a little weird of a flavor to pair in a beer-based malt bill. You don't necessarily want to taste pepper flesh as you're drinking a beer, but getting that heat and the essence of it with flavor, but without it tasting strongly like you just bit into one. That's kind of the balance that I have found most enjoyable personally, and that's exactly what they did with this one here. So this is a big, big beer. There's a lot happening. Head is still holding beautifully true. I'm going to go ahead and top this off just to get the last little bit of that bottle in there. And then we are going to jump back in for our typical second sip, let everything re-intensify, make sure I haven't missed anything. We will talk about the body and the mouthfeel, and we will talk about the balance and the finish. But first sip, it's incredible. Take two. So body and mouthfeel. This is a 12% beer, but it's in a Baltic porter style. So it may have a much higher ABV, but it still doesn't feel like a heavy beer style. Baltic porters tend to not. They actually feel pretty light, especially compared to other darker beer styles. This one, I would say, is just a nice full round medium. So is it as heavy as I expected? No, not at all. Maybe some people would see that as a negative, some as a positive, maybe some don't care, but that's what I got. It's not heavy, it's just a round medium. Indeed, this really doesn't feel that much different than, say, a Baltic porter at half this ABV at 6%. It almost feels identical. In terms of the mouthfeel, this is very much a classic porter. You can really feel the carbonation. It's very active on the palate when you move around the mouth. It does get a little bit foamy, but you can feel the resistance of it. I would say, in general, this is a little bit thicker than a lower ABV Baltic porter would be. So the mouthfeel is a bit more resistant comparative to the body for this ABV range. It's still not quite where I expected, but it's got more substance to it than the weight of the body. So together they help to kind of balance out, but in general, it's not a very heavy, weighty, viscous beer at all. So a little surprising for 12%, but that is what it is. In terms of second sip re-intensification, didn't really pick out anything new, but it of course did re-intensify all the flavors. I got to enjoy them again. It gets progressively, it's just stacking. So even though it's not super thick, super viscous, it is barrel aged. There's a lot of big, bold, in-your-face flavors. It does a pretty good job at coating those flavors around the palate, so you do get pretty good length here sticking around on each sip. In terms of the balance on this, they nailed it. Yeah, everything about the balance on this beer is perfect. The balance of the additive ingredients, the barrel in particular, the underlying malts. I mean, this is just delicious and expertly executed. For a big beer like this with this many additives, it's easy to have some things out of whack. This is beautifully balanced. In terms of the overall length of the finish, it is definitely longer than your average. This is a bourbon barrel aged, big, bold, intense flavored Baltic Imperial Porter. You don't find those every day. Never seen one with kind of this Mexican hot chocolate style vibe, but it absolutely works and it's fantastic. It's a very long finish. It's wet all the way to the end. There's no suggestion of dryness at all. So typical Baltic porter in that respect. And yeah, it's got a nice lingering bit of flavor. On this, the intensity that really sticks around on the back of the palate is the barrel in tandem with cinnamon. That's the two big flavors that I am still tasting above all others, and there's still just the tiniest hint of residual heat. So it's a really nice combination, and it does drive out the length. It's impressive. This is a big beer. I absolutely love it. When I saw this one and it was in a porter on Tavour, I knew I was going to try it. I figured it would be special, and indeed I was right. This is a fantastic beer. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, go at my scores. When we come back, we'll get this one ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Sori Brewing's Maximon, an Imperial Baltic Porter clocking in at 12% ABV. This one was bourbon barrel aged, specifically in Heaven Hill barrels, had added habañeros, cinnamon, and chocolate. Sori Brewing is based in Tallinn, Estonia. So one of very few Estonian beers I've reviewed to date, but another absolutely fantastic one. I don't know if it's just massive luck from the Estonian beers I've tried, or if they've got a really thriving craft beer scene there. But this is yet another one that is just top tier. So we're going to jump right into it. There were only 2 categories in this entire beers 10 that did not get a perfect score. So we will jump straight to both of those categories and talk about them in particular. The first of those was the body. So this really just felt more or less like if the ABV were halved. If it were 6 versus the 12% it was as an Imperial, the body felt about that same weight, that same intensity. When you double the ABV, and yes, this is not a beer style that's known as being super heavy, but you get 12%, there's a lot more fermentables in there, there's a lot more gravity, a lot more thickness naturally. It just didn't present itself that way. So really, for me, it just felt average. I expected a lot more robustness, and I think honestly saying it's average is being kind, because in my experience, an average Imperial Porter in this range is going to have a bit more heft. But I didn't want to beat the beer up, just letting you know that this, essentially, it's kind of average. It's no more weighty than you would expect for a typical ABV range of this beer style in a non-Imperial form. So the body, I did give a 5 out of 10. The second category, it did not get a perfect score, is intertwined with body, and that is, of course, mouthfeel. Well, the mouthfeel on this was definitely above average, even for an Imperial, and frankly, it's what the body needed to help kind of work together to give it a little more oomph on the texture and weight side. So the mouthfeel did have that textbook, telltale, very effervescence you could feel on the palate, and this one actually had a requisite amount of resistance. Again, for top tier status, it would have been a bit thicker, a bit more resistance, but for an Imperial in this ABV range, it was still above average, and I did give the mouthfeel a 7 out of 10, which leaves a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 8 categories. That's aroma, taste, finish, head and retention, appearance, balance, feeling, and intangible. My subjective thoughts category, an example of style, which does bring the total score on Sori Brewing's Maximon to a 92 out of 100. Guys, this was a phenomenal beer. 92 is a very high score. Frankly, the 2 categories that it didn't get perfect scores in don't really impact what the beer drinking experience is about to any great extent. This was absolutely delicious, packed full of layers of flavor in perfect balance. The balance was just spectacular. The aroma was huge, and it was a really big treat to get one of these Mexican hot chocolate kind of inspired beers in a Baltic porter format, and an Imperial nonetheless, and then bourbon barrel aged on top of it. Everything about this beer just worked, and I absolutely loved it. I did get this one from Tavour. You can bet I am absolutely going to keep my eyes out to see if they drop any more of Sori Brewing's offerings. This was a world-class beer. I am really glad I got my hands on this, and if you can find it, good luck to you. If it pops up on Tavour again, do yourself the favor, grab it. This I would recommend to any big dark beer fan. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit the bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.